Juliet Brodsky speaking with the Honourable Trevor Morling QC. Trevor Morling, it's a great pleasure to be talking with you.
Pleased to be of any help that I can be.
Thank you. Yours has been a rich and interesting life, and we'll go through as many aspects as we can during the next couple of hours. But one of the things I would very much like to start with, I'm intrigued about your father, who has been or was a key figure in the Baptist movement in Australia and was described as one of the four most admired Baptists, Reverend George Morling. Can you tell us a little bit about his contribution to public life before we get to yours?
My father was a very junior Baptist minister, aged about 28 or 29, when the principal of the Baptist Theological College, who was imported from England, left the college suddenly, and my father was asked at very short notice to give up his pastorate and become for 6 months the acting principal of the college. He did that and he stayed for 39 years and became, I think it's fair to say, a bit of an institution in what I would describe as being evangelical interests in Australia. In particular, which was unusual in those days, he became very friendly with people, particularly in the Anglican Church, with the then Archbishop of Sydney. No, before Archbishop Mole, he became Archbishop, I think, about 1938, I think. It was before then. Dad became principal of the Baptist College about 1922, I think. But then he became increasingly friendly with people who later became Archbishops of Sydney, for instance, Marcus Lone and Donald Robinson, and people who became bishops, and that was very unusual in Baptist circles in those days, which, although I say it myself, I think were very narrow-minded and kept very much to themselves. And if Dad made, and I think he did make, a contribution to religious life in this state and beyond, it was because I think he broadened the outlook of people who I would regard, they would not so describe themselves, but as a bit narrow-minded in their approach to contact with other people.
The college you mentioned, of course, is named for him, and he was principal there for a good 40 years.
Yes, that's right. The college was... I was born in the college at a little place in Granville. I lived in the college. It shifted to Ashfield until I married when I was 27 years of age. Dad retired, I think, I'm guessing, but say about 64, and he was hugely, and that's a fair description, admired by his former students. Were people like Donald Robinson became Archbishop. They were not. No, Robinson, of course, was not one of his former students, but he was hugely admired by a wide variety of his people, particularly in the Baptist Union. And they asked, I think in his lifetime, they did, whether they could change the name of the college from the Baptist Theological College of New South Wales to Morling College, and I think that's how it came about.
You mentioned that he did a great deal to broaden people's perceptions, if you like, of the Baptist movement. What kind of personality was he? He clearly must have been a strong, engaging personality.
Well, he was a man who was incapable of, if not being critical of other people, at least expressing his criticisms. I doubt whether in today's society he would have had the qualities that need to be held by the principal of a very large college. He was hopeless in business affairs, totally unable to manage financial matters. My mother used to tear her hair out because Dad would be asked to go and speak interstate, for instance, and she would have to give him enough money to get him through the visit. And when he got there, he'd give half of it away to some minister he knew was hard up. You know, he was a very nice man. He was unable to chastise his children, which we should have no doubt been chastised. But he was a principal of a college when he was principal, with a maximum of about 30 young men, all young men in those days, studying for the ministry. Nowadays, of course, Morling College is a huge institution. It's got hundreds of students with a very big campus, and the job of the college, as really is now the job of a Chief Justice, is more administrative in the college's case rather than teaching.
So in a way, the picture I'm now getting is, as you said before, not necessarily a practical man, but he must have been inspirational and influential in other ways.
He was. He was very... he's a very good preacher. He was asked to preach all the time, interstate. The man who became, a couple of people I can think of, 3 or 4 people who became Anglican bishops, used to ask him to come to preach when they were rectors of churches before they became bishop. He used to be asked to preach in New Zealand all the time, interstate. He was a very much accepted principle in a preacher, not in a style that perhaps some people would associate. I wouldn't necessarily myself, but would associate with shall I say, declamatory style. He was a theologian, and he spoke like a theologian, not a lot of hand-waving or thumping of the table, nothing like that. He was a very considered person.
How much of his style, his preaching style, rubbed off on you as an advocate, I wonder?
I think whether it rubbed off on me, but I would, in the legal sense, share his avoidance of histrionics, which I think was what every barrister should do at any rate. But I was never one, even in the days which I lived in, when juries were very, very common. I never took the view that you could persuade a jury to your client's point of view merely by speechifying. You had to sort of treat juries as sensible people. They were looking for reasons why they could find for or against one party, and I would direct my remarks, as I think most barristers would be. I mean, the most famous example of that was no less a person than Sir Garfield Barwick, who was a great lawyer and who would appear in the High Court in a constitutional case one day and the next day be addressing a judge in a contested divorce case or a jury in a contested case against an insurance company. And he would never have thumped the table in his life, but he was very persuasive as an advocate. And I think now that juries have more or less gone except in criminal matters, I think there's been a much greater acceptance of the view, great acceptance by the bar generally of the view that histrionics doesn't get you very far in court. There are always one or two people who by their very nature, declaim their point of view, but not many, I think.
Well, we'll return to that shortly because I'm very interested to hear more of your views on that area. But just returning to your earliest years, how many brothers and sisters did you have?
I'm the sole survivor of 5 children. I had 2 sisters and 2 brothers.
Were you the eldest?
I was the youngest.
They sometimes say in the pecking order of families that the youngest tends to go off in their own direction. Was that necessarily true of you?
In a way, yes, but not, I think, because of any influence of my siblings. I was going to mention, at any rate, how I came to be in the law. I had no connection of any sort through either of my parents or any family member. And I came from a pretty big family, lots of aunts and uncles, and I was the only person who entered the law. And I entered the law, to be perfectly frank, because I didn't know what to do. I had a reasonably good pass in the Leaving Certificate, went to university, did a 2 years arts course, thinking I'd probably be a school teacher. And to amuse myself at no expense, I would go up to Darlinghurst Taylor Square, where the criminal courts were, and just sit in the back of the court. If there was a murder case on, for instance, which was getting a bit of publicity, I would go up and just sit in the back of the court for 2 or 3 hours and get some free entertainment. And that sort of made me think, well, I wouldn't mind giving the law a go. And I did. And stayed there for 50 years.